This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good evening everyone. This is going to be the first part of possibly a number of shiurim on maybe one of the most controversial topics that we've spoken about yet. Okay, we begin innocuously, and that's saying a lot. We begin innocuously with the day that is ahead of us, with Tu B'Shvat, which is not really mentioned too often in Shulchan Aruch. The only mention of Tu B'Shvat in Shulchan Aruch is that you don't say Tachnan. No other mention is given. There's no mention of eating fruits. There's no mention of any kind of Perois, Tish, Shizmirois, Shirois. Nothing is mentioned. It's just a day not to say Tachnan. And the Magen Avraham brings down that what is the significance of Tu B'Shvat? Rosh Hashanah li'ilanois. It's a Rosh Hashanah for trees. Now, that's actually, it doesn't mean that trees are judged. Trees are not judged on Tu B'Shvat. It's actually a halachic day. What happens is that the Gemara tells us that on Tu B'Shvat, by the time Tu B'Shvat comes, the majority of the rain of the year has already fallen, and the sap that's in the tree begins to rise up and go into the branches, and it's already paving the way for Chanata, for it to blossom. So it's a Rosh Hashanah li'ilanois in terms of Meiser. In other words, whatever was Chanat before Tu B'Shvat is last year's produce. Whatever was Chanat after Tu B'Shvat is the coming year. So it's not a very spiritual concept. It's a halachic concept. The concept is it's a deadline. Whatever grew before Tu B'Shvat is last year's produce. Whatever grew after Tu B'Shvat is this year's produce. Says the Magen Avraham, "V'noyagin ha'ashkenazim laharbois b'minei perosh shel ilanois." The minhag is that the Ashkenazim, not the Sfardim, only Ashkenazim. The minhag is Ashkenazim laharbois b'minei perosh shel ilanois. They eat a lot of fruits. Okay, sounds easy enough. I know most people don't like to eat fruits anymore, but once a year, it won't kill you. The minhag is Ashkenazim eat fruits. That is the entire mention of Tu B'Shvat in Talmud Bavli, Talmud Yerushalmi, Shulchan Aruch, Tosefta, Sifra, Sifri, Mechilta. All you have is one sif in Shulchan Aruch and a comment of the Magen Avraham that Ashkenazim eat a lot of fruits. We have now, Marv Rabbi Sai, the source of what has become known as the expanded Tu B'Shvat service among the Sfardim, among the Hasidim, and those who pay attention to the Shiur realize that there are always many similarities between the Sfardim and the Hasidim in terms of their practice, in terms of making Kabbalah the more of a center point of the observance. There's a Sefer Chemdas Yamim, and it's not an understatement. Chemdas Yamim is probably the most controversial Sefer in all the entire spectrum of Jewish literature. If you never heard of it, that's because you probably never saw it in a shul. I happen to have a copy of one, and it's become more popular lately. But it's literally a very controversial Sefer, and the gamut ranges from those who consider it a Sefer Kadosh to those who will not open it up and will not look at it. And it doesn't matter, some Litvish are one way, some the other way, some Hasidim one way. It depends what your Messiah is. But it's become more acceptable, and we're about to see. Okay, the entire source of the service of Tu B'Shvat, of you see Perois Tish with all kinds of fruits, and making different brachos and different zmirois, shirois. It comes from the Sefer Chemdas Yamim, and Chemdas Yamim says that on Tu B'Shvat, even though it comes out during Shovavim, right? So it's during the Parshas of Shmois Va'era Boy B'Shalach Yisrael Mishpatim. We don't fast if Tu B'Shvat comes out on Monday and Thursday, even if you would ordinarily fast on Monday and Thursday, because it's Rosh Hashanah La'ilanois. And the Chemdas Yamim says there are tremendous tikkunim that should be performed on Tu B'Shvat, and he says as follows in number 2, about 6 lines from the end: Uminug Toiv, it's a good custom. Laholchim b'tamim, those who walk on the straight path. Leharbois b'peiros b'etzem hazeh, to eat a lot of fruits. V'loimar divrei shiros v'tishbach aleim, to sing, to praise Hashem. And that is my personal custom, says the Chemdas Yamim. Kasher henhagti l'chol hachaverim asher imadi, as is my custom with all my friends. This is what we do. We get together and we Tu B'Shvat together. We're noiheg Tu B'Shvat. I asked the Chemdas Yamim, But if you look in the writings of Harav, presumably that means Arizal. There is no mention of any practice. Okay, it's not in the Gemara, fine, but at least you would expect in the Sefer Kabbalah there should be some mention of the service of Tu B'Shvat. If you look in the writings of the Arizal and Rav Chaim Vital, there is no mention of any type of services on Tu B'Shvat. But, says the Chemdas Yamim, despite that, in my opinion, it's a tikkun nifla. It's a wondrous tikkun. Now, already, there's a red light here. So why doesn't that result talk about? Why is there no mention of it in the Svarim of Rabbi Chaim Vital? So he presents it in the following way. The very last Yushalmi, Masechta Kedushin, says, Rabbi Chizkiah, in the name of Rav Kohen, in the name of Rav, I think a lot of people would be very pleased with this Gemara, that la'asad lavai, a person is going to be held accountable, is going to have to give a din mecheshbon for every single food that they saw and they didn't eat. And I know a lot of people are very makbid on this. The Yushalmi says that la'asad lavai, a person is going to give a din mecheshbon on whatever food they saw and they didn't. Now, it doesn't mean you have to eat the whole thing. It could mean like a little crumb, Like Gedoyle Manchad, they give them a big plate and they eat like a little speck of. But whatever you see and you're going to give a din mecheshbon on. Says the Gemara, Reb Leizer chashash l'hada shmuasa. Reb Leizer was very chashash for this teaching, and he used to save coins in his pocket so that whenever he would see a food, he could buy it at least once a year. It's an amazing thing. The Yushalmi says that whatever you see, you got to make sure to eat, because if you don't make sure to eat it, you're going to give a din mecheshbon one day why you didn't eat the food. In fact, Reb Leizer, he was very choshesh for this, and he made sure to carry change in his pocket. So whenever you saw a new food, he heard there's a truck in the driveway of the shul, he made sure to be there to at least taste a little bit. This way he doesn't have to give a din mecheshbon. What's pshat in this Yushalmi? What kind of Yushalmi is this? You have to eat everything you see? What's the Indian of eating everything you see? Furthermore, the Gemara says like this. The Gemara Brachas Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis Amar Rav Chanina Bar Papa. Anybody who is neneh from this world and does not make a bracha is stealing. He's stealing from God. He's stealing from Klal Yisrael. And the Gemara implies he's stealing from his father and his mother. He's stealing from his father and his mother. His father and mother, they gave him the money. He bought the food, so he didn't make a bracha. How is he stealing like from his father and his mother? Says the Sefer Chemdas Yamim. Again, this is the makar of the expanded Tu B'Shvat. You'll open up the pictures in the Haredi newspapers, and you'll see all kinds of pictures of Tishim and Rebbes. Where does it come from? Chemdas Yamim. This Sefer ain't coming from the Shulchan Aruch. It doesn't come from the Magen Avram. This is where it comes from.
When did he live?
Who's he? I didn't even tell you who wrote it. I don't know. We'll see. So the Chemdas Yamim says that the following, that everything in this world has a malach appointed over it that is mashpia shefa to that item, that gives it sustenance, and continually is God's agent to provide to the world more of the same. But to ensure that the malach continues to be God's agent, to be mashpia, chef in this world, you have to make a bracha. So if somebody were to eat a fruit and not make a bracha, then the koyach of that fruit is lost forever. Then the shefa of apples is gone forever, or for a long time, or it's affected. Or if you eat that hot dog and you don't make the bracha, then the koyach of the hot dog is diminished in this world. Chas v'shalom, there might be a chesara and a diminution in the power of hot dogs in this world. The koyach, the shefa of basar shamein, the koyach of fatty meats, of good food, it's going to be lost if you don't make a bracha. More than that, every food in this world has a spiritual spark in it, has a nitzot hakadosh, which is connected to you. And when you make a bracha, you activate that spark, and you bring it into you, and it actually energizes your neshama. But more than that, I'll tell you over Ar Chaim HaKadosh, the beginning of Parshas Kairach, or in Parshas Vayechi, Yaakov Avinu davened, B'soidam al tavai nafshi, b'kaholam al techad kavoidi. Yaakov Avinu was mispalel that when Kairach has his fight, I don't want my name mentioned. When Zimri does his Avera, I don't want my name mentioned. So by Zimri's Avera, it says he came from Shevet Shimon, it doesn't say Ben Yaakov. By Kairach, it says Ben Yisrael, Ben Kahas, Ben Levi, it doesn't say Yaakov. Why? Yaakov did not want his name mentioned and associated with any of these Averas. So, as Ar Chaim HaKadosh, Well, I mean, everybody knows Yaakov is the Zayda. I mean, it's not like you could hide it under. You can't really hide it from people. Everybody knows this is not the only time the Torah says the lineage. Everybody knows Shimon's father was Yaakov. Everybody knows Levi's father was Yaakov. Says the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh Davar Nifla, that every human being has in their neshama, not only their own neshama, but a spark of the neshama of their father and their grandfather and their great-grandfather and their great-great-grandfather. And when a person does an Aveira, it's plegame, not only your own neshama, it's plegame the piece of your father's neshama in you, and the piece of your grandfather's neshama in you. So Yaakov Avinu was saying, when Kairach sins, I don't want him being plegame the piece of me in him. There's a piece of Yaakov in Kairach. Yaakov was Nispalel, I don't want the piece of me in Kairach to be affected. When Shimon sins, I don't want the piece of me in Shimon to be affected. So says the Chemdas Yamim, whenever you eat food and you extract the spark of Kedusha, you're energizing not only your neshama, you're energizing your father's neshama, your grandfather's neshama, your great-grandfather's neshama. And if you don't make a bracha on a food, you're causing a pagam, not only in your neshama, but all the doiros back. So that's what the Gemara means, that if somebody eats food and he doesn't make a bracha, he's stealing from his father and his mother. But more than that, not only if somebody doesn't make a bracha, is he stealing from his father and mother? If someone sees a good piece of food and he doesn't take the opportunity to remove the sparks of Kedusha in it, to energize his neshama and his grandfather's neshama, his great-grandfather's neshama, he's also stealing from his parents. So he says that you have to make sure that at least once in a while you make sure to taste every type of food. Again, how this plays, how you do this l'maisa, you have to ask your local Orthodox rabbi. I'm just telling you what he says. You make sure to partake of all types of food. You make the proper bracha. You say the bracha with the proper kavana. You activate the nitzotzos of kedusha in the food, and this way you energize your neshama and all the neshamas of all the doros who are inside of you. And then he says as follows. Now, by the way, just a side point. An amazing thing that the Kaf HaChaim brings down in the name of Rav Chaim Vital, in the name of the Arizal, that the Arizal told Rav Chaim Vital that where did he get Ruach HaKodesh from? In other words, where did the Arizal had one of the greatest accesses in history to the Shamayim. Where did he get it from? From the Kayach of which mitzvah? Rav Chaim Vital says the Arizal told him that the Ruach HaKodesh that he had, he gained through having Kavana by Birchas Hanehanen. Half of a fella. You would think maybe the Arizal, his Tanesim, his Sigufim, his Tvilos in the mikvah. No, the Koyach HaKedusha of the Arizal to be able to see, from one end of the world to the next, it's when he ate food and he made a proper bracha. And the Arizal says because all food has in it klipos, I guess some food more than others, and they bring a person down, and by making a bracha, it removes all impurities of the food, and when you eat the food, after making a proper bracha, the food is makadesh you. Okay, very interesting. So actually, making the proper bracha on food brings a person tremendous aliyah, and says the Chemdas Yom, especially on Tu B'Shvat, which is the Yom Tif of Peiros, you try to eat as many fruits as possible, you make a bracha, and you sanctify yourself through it. Okay. And then he continues. Does anybody know, Al Pi Kabbalah, how many Oilamos are there in general? 4, good. The word in Navi that is Maramis to it is the word Abiyah. Abiyah stands for? Abiyah Aleph is Atzilus, that's the highest world. That's Sham Mishkan Kudshabricha, that's where God is, so to speak. That's Aleph. Beis is Olam HaBriya. That's maybe the Kisei HaKavod. Then there's Olam HaYetzira, Malachei HaShares, and then we're downstairs, Olam HaAsiyah. We're in the world of action. Abiyah, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiyah. Now, every realm and every world is composed of how many manifestations? How many spheroids? 7 plus 3, so 10. 10 spheroids. So that means there are 10 spheroids for Atzilus, 10 spheroids for Bria, 10 spheroids for Yetzira, 10 spheroids for Asiyah. And we're merames to it every morning by Baruch David, Hagdula, Hagvura, V'Teveres, V'Anes, V'Hoy, K'chol, B'Shmamra. It's fine. Chashem HaMamlacha. Just like there are three worlds, now the fourth world is God Himself, we can't even talk about it. But besides Atzilus, there are three worlds. And each world has 10 spheros. Says the Chemdas Yamim, and this is something the Ramchal writes about, every physical being in this world is the physical manifestation of a spiritual realm. So there are three worlds and 10 spheros, and that is why we have a tradition, says the Chemdas Yamim, that Reb Chaim Vital teaches us that there are 30 fruits. There are 30 fruits. Now what do you mean? There are 70 types of dates. How could there be 30 fruits? Gourmet God has 90, No, but in general, the general categories are 30 types of fruits. 10 fruits keneged olam habriya, 10 fruits keneged olam hayetzira, and 10 fruits keneged olam ha'asiya. And the 30 fruits could be broken out into 10, 10, and 10. And there's a fundamental difference between these three groups of fruits. Let me tell you, there are three types of fruits. There's some fruits that are just good through and through. The peel, you eat it. The seed, you eat it. A grape. You pop the grape, and that's it. You don't have to remove the peel. You don't have to spit out the pit. It's just good through and through. And there are a lot of fruits like that. An esrog, you could bite right through. A lemon. A pear. A quince. I don't know what a quince is, but I never had one. A carob. I'm not sure what a carob is either. It's like, for me, it's like eating the table. I don't know. I know. Buxer, I know it is. I'm joking. I don't know how somebody could actually eat buxer. Sometimes I hear people, this buxer's good, that buxer's bad. I mean, it's like eating the bookcase. I mean, this one, whatever. If you like it, you like it. I can't argue with you. There are certain types of fruits that are good through and through. They have no klipa. They have no psoiles. They correspond to olam habriya. With no shell and no seed. Those are the 10 fruits that correspond to Olam HaBriya. Then you have another 10 types of fruits. They correspond to the next world, Olam HaYetzira, which is far away from this lowly world, but also a little bit further away from the Shechina. And they are fruits that you could eat the peel, but the seed is very hard. You got to spit out the seed. And those fruits are olives. Olives have pits. You can't eat the pit. Dates. And that type of fruit. They correspond to Olam HaYetzira. And then this lowly world has its 10 fruits. And the fruits of this world, the pit is fine, it's the peel that's the problem. For example, pomegranate, and all the nuts, and the pistachio nuts, and the walnuts, those are all ha'etz, they're all considered fruits. And they have this outer shell, it has a klipa. That klipa represents that this world is so tameh, that you have to have like a shell around you, not to be influenced from the tumah of the outside world. Fine. So you have 10 fruits keneged olam habriya, 10 fruits keneged olam hayetzira, and 10 fruits keneged olam ha'asiya. And they all correspond to different types of kedusha. The 10 fruits of olam habriya correspond to something that is holy through and through. Then there's another type of kedusha that has some koyach hatuma in it, but the koyach hatuma is so overwhelmed that it has nowhere to go but to hide itself on the inside. That's like the date. The date with the pit inside corresponds to a davar kadosh ma'od that has a little bit of a klipa that is being overwhelmed by the kedusha. And then there's a fruit that has so much klipa that the kedusha is sort of, going on the inside, and that's like the remain, and so on and so forth. And therefore, says the Chemdas Yamim, on Tisha B'Av, on Tu B'Shvat, you should, we'll see about Tisha B'Av soon, on Tu B'Shvat, you should try to eat fruits from all three realms. This way, you sanctify every type of fruit. So Absender asked me before the Shiur, it's very interesting. In the Mishnah, in Rosh Hashanah, it talks about all the various Rosh Hashanahs, and it says, Limelachim, Laregalim, everything is Lashon Rabim, except for Tu B'Shvat Rosh Hashanah Le'ilan, the tree, Lashon Yachid. Yeah, so usually every year we say a pshat in that. But the Chemdas Yamim says, the reason is because, the Chemdas Yamim is the number 7 at the end, that the reason why it says Ilan, is it's a remez to the tree, the Ilane Dechaye, the tree of life. Plus, what's the gematria of the word Ilan? 91. We know 91 is a big number. Yud Kei Vav Kei Aleph Daled Nun Yud, right? Plus, if you spell out Elon Bimiluai, so spell it out like this: Aleph, Aleph, Lamed, Pei, Yud, Vav, Daled, Lamed, Lamed, Mem, Daled, and Nun is Nun, Vav, Nun. Gematria 311. The 12 names, right? We know that the Yud Kei Vav Kei, there are 12 permutations of Yud Kei Vav Kei. So 12 times 26 is 312. It's Keneged Elon B'miluai, which is 311. Okay. Now this idea that there are 30 types of fruits is a very well documented Kabbalistic concept, that there are 30 main fruits in this world, 10 Keneged Olam HaBriya, 10 Keneged Olam HaYetzira, and 10 Keneged Olam HaAsiyah. That is not the invention of the Chemdas Yamim. What is his invention is that you should be eating these fruits on Tu B'Shvat. Nowhere in Halacha or in any of the Sefer Kabbalah does it say to have a whole Seder for Tu B'Shvat. In fact, if you look at the end of number 10, Chemdas Yamim gives you various passages in the Chumash to read as you're eating different fruits. He created an entire program to be observed on Tu B'Shvat, and he ends off his conversation as follows. He says, especially on Tu B'Shvat, when you eat the fruits, you should be mechavein to be mesakein the chet of Adam Arishain. And he says, really, whenever you eat fruits, you should have that in mind. But there's no day like the day that you are designated for eating fruits to try to be mesakein the chet of Adam Arishain. And he ends off with a story. And it's brought down in the Sefer Hasidim. There was a man who died young, and he came to someone in a dream. And the guy who's having the dream says, "Nu, was machst du? What's going on? How is it upstairs?" He says, "Bad news. You wouldn't believe what's going on upstairs." He said, "No, well, tell me about it." He said, "Every day they torture me." "What'd you do wrong already?" So what did I do wrong? I didn't make brachas with kavana. So says the Chemdas Yamim, if this is the punishment of someone who doesn't make brachas with kavana, imagine somebody is mezalzel not to make brachas at all, or doesn't know the correct bracha to make. So this is, he says, a good time to make sure to learn hilchos brachas. Marv Rabbi, who in the world wrote the Chemdas Yamim? That's the $1 million question. It's an anonymous Sefer. We don't know who wrote it. Well, we do know that the Leshem, Rav Shlomo Yashiv, one of the greatest all-time Mekubalim, the grandfather of Rav Yosef Shlomo Yashiv, Zechariah Levracha, he wrote a Sefer Leshem Shavai Ve'Achlama, which is one of the preeminent works of Kabbalah on what is called the Kabbalah of the Vilna Gaon. There are different branches of Kabbalah. You have the different streams of Kabbalah. And the Leshem happens to write Agav Orcha in the Sefer Hadeya, in Chelek Beis, Drush Daled, Anaf Chav Daled, Siman Ches. He quotes like this. He says, Ra'isi le'eze kedoshei elyain. I saw that some of the most sanctified people wrote something, and he mentions who? Sefer Ches Yud. Chemdas Yamim. So we don't know who wrote it. All we know is the Leshem says that whoever wrote it was one of the Kedoshei Elyain. Okay. So, that narrows it down. But who wrote it? Yeah, but we know that's what he's referring to. Enters Rabbi Yaakov Emden. Now Rabbi Yaakov Emden was one of the great Achronim. He lived from 1698 to 1776. Rabbi Yaakov Emden was a Kanoi, Ben Kanoi. His father was the Chacham Tzvi, Rabbi Tzvi Ashkenazi. Tzvi Ashkenazi lived from 1648 to 1718. They both lived, Tzvi Ashkenazi lived during, and Rabbi Yaakov Emden lived after the greatest debacle in Jewish history, and that is Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi was born in 1626. He was Sephardi. He was born supposedly on Tisha B'Av, and he sort of promoted the fact. We don't really know that he was born on Tisha B'Av, but he liked to say that he was born on Tisha B'Av. By the way, the word Shabtai means Saturn. It's the highest planet, supposedly connected to Mashiach. He was born in Smyrna, which is Turkey today, in Izmir. And he was a brilliant mind, and a very charismatic personality, and had very strange behavior. Today's not the Shiur to talk about Shabtai Tzvi. By the time he was in his low 20s, he was already married and divorced 2 times. Both times he didn't even consummate the marriage. He said he had a prophecy that she's not the one. If he was ever able to market that, he's got something going. And after that he heard about a certain Zoina who he married, and a lot of very scandalous activities. But for the most part, he was accepted not only by the rank and file, but most Gedolei Yisrael. And in his modesty, he wasn't yet ready to proclaim himself the Messiah. But every scam artist needs a PR director, and his PR director was a man by the name of Nathan of Gaza, Nasan Hoazasi. Nasan Hoazasi was born in 1643, and he died in 1680. He was born in Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. He was Ashkenazi. In fact, his name was Nasan Halevi Ashkenazi. His father was from Germany. And he was a great Talmud Chacham. He was a Talmud of Rabbi Yaakov Chagiz. He's a tremendous Lamdan, tremendous Makubal. The problem with him was that he had visions. And when the guy has visions, there's no telling what they're going to do. He had a little bit too many visions. Now, Shabtai Tzvi was ill. At the time, nobody knew what it was, but it's suspected that he was manic, depressive, bipolar. And he actually came to Nathan of Gaza to cure him. And during these, psychoanalysis, Nathan of Gaza convinced him that he, in fact, is Mashiach. And he believed it. He fell for it. And at that point in time, in 1665, Nathan of Gaza announced that in a year's time, the Messiah is going to reveal itself. And in fact, in Rosh Hashanah, on that year, they announced that Shabtai Tzvi is Mashiach, and they called him Amira. Amira stands for Adonenu, Morenu, Yaram Haidai. They called him Amira. Okay. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden was the son of the Chacham Tzvi, and in their zealousness, they sort of, anybody who had any inkling or any semblance or any tattering or even the slightest inclination toward the Kabbalah or toward mysticism, they weeded them out because they were under suspect that maybe they were secret followers of Shabtai Tzvi. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden was called Kanoi ben Kanoi. His father, the Chacham Tzvi, was a great Kanoi against the followers of Shabtai Tzvi, and Rabbi Yaakov Emden continued in those ways. Well, Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes in the Sefer Migdal Oz. Are we on the air? Kind of. Okay. So, Rabbi Yaakov Emden wrote a Sefer Migdal Oz. And in the Sefer Migdal Oz, Rabbi Yaakov Emden mentions the fact that he once caught wind of the Sefer Chemdas Yamim. And he says, by the way, you know what I think of the Sefer Chemdas Yamim? He says, Kasher Ata Mikarov, Roisi Be'enai, Sefer Miyuchad, Nikra Chemdas Hayamim. You know what I say about the Sefer? Mole Toyevois. It's full of abominations, Una Atzais, and provocations. Now, by the way, many Minhagei Yisrael come from the Sefer Chemdas Hayamim. Say, really? Like what? Like L'David Hashem Oiri V'yishi. Like, what do you say between Mincha and Marav Friday night? I say B'Mem Adlikin. Kegavna comes from the Sefer Chemdas Yamim. At Rosh Hashanah night, when they open up the Aron and they say L'David Mizmar, afterwards there's a Yehiratzain. Where did that Yehiratzain come from? Chemdas Yamim. Where did the Yehiratzain of Tashlich come from? Chemdas Yamim. They're Kama v'Chama. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Sans does not say L'David Hashem Oyer V'Yishi, because it comes from the Sefer Chemdas Yamim. But we're about to see. Well, says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, let me tell you my opinion about the Chemdas Yamim. It's mole toyevois una atzois hamidut selem atame behechal kodesh. He put an idol in the holy hechal, and he cloaked it with bakashois and tchinois and different tfilos. Many of the yehiratzoins in the Siddur come from the Sefer Chemdas Yamim. That's where it comes from. He says, Oilanu, ma'osa b'yameinu, that they put in various shemois into the Sefer. He says, Shem Risham Yirkov, and Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes, venomous attack on the Sefer Chemdas Yamim. Okay, but who wrote it? What's so bad about it? What are these provocations in the Sefer Chemdas Yamim? Well, look at number 14. Rabbi Yaakov Emden wrote another article called Igeres Purim that was published in the Sefer Mikdash Melech, and he says that I already discussed the Sefer previously, that it's full of that disgusting, abominable group, and this shikutz and this abomination is alluded to. Now, we say, what's alluded to? Gematrias. If you figure out the gematria of any word in Chemdas Yamim, it's gematria shikutzim. And says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, from now on, we're not calling it Sefer Chemdas Yamim, we're calling it Sefer Sinas Hayamim. Because every single line of this Sefer is full of tayevos. And he says, I promise you that anyone who picks up this book to read it will not escape unharmed.
I don't want to come near it.
Now, so we still have no idea, what's bad about the Sefer, what's wrong with the Sefer. Well, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, one of the great opponents of the Sabbateans, was someone by the name of Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas. Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas collected all the letters from any of the Gedolim who had any connection to Shabtai Tzvi. And one of these wonderful letters that he collected was a letter from none other than Rabbi Yaakov Emden himself. And here he really gets at it. Says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, Oidoist, on the first line, Sefer Chemdas Hayamim. You know who wrote the Sefer? Shechiber Navi HaSheker Shel Shabtai Tzvi. Chemdas Hayamim was written by the prophet of Shabtai Tzvi, Nathan of Gaza. Shem, number 15, Shem Rishayim Yirkov. He says, Nasan Huazasi, a wicked man, an Ish Rasha, who is so clung to his Avodah Zarah, namely Shabtai Tzvi, who has destroyed the entire Torah. And he says, nobody, it's usher to learn the Sefer Chemdas Yamim, unless you're a big tzaddik and you need to learn it to be able to tell the people to keep away from it. And he's turning the whole world away from Torah and away from Yerushalayim. He says, every single page is mezuyaf mitoichai with minus of Shabtai Tzvi, is marumas in every single page of the Sefer. Now, just want you to know, how many times does Shabtai Tzvi's name appear in the Sefer Chemdas Yamim? None. Where is he alluded to? Nowhere. And yet Rabbi Yaakov Emden says that every line of the book is dripping with allusions to the Shabtai Tzvi. And in fact, Rabbi Yaakov Emden wrote a tshuva about it. And in the Shelas Yavitz, in Chelek Beis, Siman Kuf Chaf Daled, Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes about the hiratzain that some people say by Rosh Chodesh benching. And the questioner had a reason to believe that it should not be said. It says, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, of course you're not allowed to say it. It's usher to say it. It was written by Nasan Azasi, the prophet of Shabtai Tzvi. It's mole, soya, it's full of excrement, it's full of vomit, he says. You can't say it. You can't say any of these hiratzains. You have to remove them all. Now it's unclear which. It's not clear which Yehiratzon he's talking about. Which one? That's also true. The Rebanish, the Yehiratzon of Yom Tovim. Okay, Marav Rabbi say the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov Emden is very clear, that the author of Chemdas Yamim is the prophet of Shabtai Tzvi. You're not to open it. You're not to read it. It's also to learn. And as far as Rabbi Yaakov Emden is concerned, it's a Sefer Tameh. So I was wondering, because I opened it up, and it has very nice haskama in it. First of all, the first haskama is Rabbi Vadia Yosef says it's a Sefer Kadosh, and that if somebody wants to have Yerushalayim, he should try to learn from it as much as possible. and it has a haskama from Reb Shlomo ben Shimon, but more than that, it has the haskama of 90 achronim who learned from the Sefer Chemdas Yamim. For example, and I think they were Orthodox rabbis. Let's say, for example, let's see if we could find them. Well, we mentioned the Leshem, and
Most of the names are.
the Sefer Eshel Avram, the Sefer Ikari Dinim, the Sefer of Reb Shlomo Malko, the Sefer, the Chasam Sofer, the Vilna Gaon, the Talmidei Hagra, the Yisod V'Shar Sha'avoda, Rav Ephraim Zal Margolis, the Ber Hetev, the El Yorabba, and many, many Admorim. So, Marav Rabbi say, what's going on over here?
I didn't say this kind of stuff.
Well, we're not done. Because I'm going to tell you now, and we'll close after this. One of the most unusual things I ever heard, and maybe you'll ever hear. There's a Sefer, Minchas Yehuda. Minchas Yehuda was written by Rabbi Yehuda Fataya. Rabbi Yehuda Fataya was one of the Mekubalim in the late 19th century. He lived from 1859 to 1942. He was somewhat of a Rebbe, Rav Yosef. He specialized in exorcising demons and diviks. You know, if you were possessed, he was the man you needed to speak to. You know, Rabbi Yehuda Fataya. And Rabbi Yehuda Fataya had a lot of dreams. And he recorded his dreams. So let me tell you about some of the dreams of Rabbi Yehuda Fataya. And this man, Rabbi Yehuda Fataya, you know, he saw everything. What was his opinion about the Sefer Chemdas Yamim? Well, he says like this. It was the night of Hanukkah, and it was the year Taf Reish Ayin Aleph. That's the year 1911. And by the way, in the Chemdas Yamim, which I have, he brings down the Megillas Antiochus, which is like one of the ancient versions of the Hanukkah story. And he says, I was reading it to my children, and I dozed off. And in my dream, he says, I saw a man. Now, by the way, he introduces this dream with the following. He says, you know Nasan Hoazasi, the prophet of Shabtai Tzvi? He was a big Talmud Chacham. He was a big Lamdin. He's a big Gadol. He's a big Baki. And he's in Gehenna right now. And let me tell you about a dream that I had. Why? So he falls asleep, telling his children about the Hanukkah story. He sees a man, a heavy man, good-looking guy, and his face was smooth. He didn't have a beard. He had a few little hairs, you know, a few little chicken hairs coming out of his face. And he's standing behind me. And all of a sudden he whispers into my ear the following. He says, I'm the author of Chemdas Hayamim. If you follow me, meaning if you believe in Shabtai Tzvi. Now this is the year 1911. You know, Shabtai Tzvi had long converted to Islam. You know that ultimately Shabtai Tzvi converted to Islam. But Nasan Hoazasi was such a good PR director. He said, this is all part of it. You see, this is going to separate the men from the mice. Of course, you're going to believe in Shabtai Tzvi when he's a Jew. Let's see who believes in him when he's a Muslim. You know, this is all part of the divine plan to weed out the disbelievers. And Nasan Azasi whispers into Rabbi Yehuda Fataya's ear, if you follow me and you believe in Shabtai Tzvi, I will teach you the entire Sefer Chemdas Hayomim in one split second. So I said to him, how is it possible to learn Chemdas Hayomim in one split second? I mean, it's like, 2 volumes with hundreds of pages. He says, let me explain something to you. You know why I wrote the Sefer Chemdas Hayomim? Because who would ever believe me that Shabtai Tzvi is the real Mashiach? Nobody's going to accept my opinion. But if I write a Sefer of Musar and Yira and Kabbalah and I show the world that I am the leading expert of Kabbalah in the world, then after they read my Sefer, they'll say, if he's telling us that Shabtai Tzvi is Mashiach, he must really be Mashiach. So I wrote the whole Sefer Chemdas Yamim in order to veer people off the derech and convince them that Shabtai Tzvi is Mashiach. So what I mean that if you believe in Shabtai Tzvi, I'll teach you Chemdas Yamim in one moment, is that the whole purpose of Chemdas Yamim is to believe in Shabtai Tzvi. So if you tell me you believe in him, so it's like you learned the whole thing in 1 second, you don't even have to learn it. And then I woke up from the dream. That was the end of the dream. Now clearly Rabbi Yehuda Fataya believes that, who's the author of Chemdas Yamim? Nasan HaAzazi. I mean, he came to him in a dream, and he wrote in his Sefer. Well, 2 nights later, he had another dream. And in this dream, he saw himself in shul mincha time, and he was sitting on one of these woolen rugs, and he was wearing a woolen cloak. It was very cold in his dream. And he was sitting and learning. He had like 20 Sfarim piled up, including the Eitz Chaim and the Shemaina Prakim. And he was involved in a very deep Kabbalistic sugya. And all of a sudden he saw an oirev, he saw a raven. And it was a big raven. It was like twice the size of a regular raven. And it flew into his coat. And he feels like this raven. Now, I don't know, I never had a raven fly into my coat, even in a dream, but it's probably not that comfortable. And then he hears, now the raven was like, looked very confused. It looked like he was just beat over the head. He was like, he was in the concussion protocol. And he was being chased, the raven being chased by 3 guys in clubs. And they're looking for him. And all of a sudden I hear a 4th guy, who's like supposedly in charge of the 3 guys, saying, well, you lied to me! You told me Nasan is here! Nasan's not here! Then I realized that the raven was Nasan HaAzazi. And they pointed, no, he's in the cloak! And the raven flew away. And then I woke up. And I fell asleep again. And I had another dream. And in this dream, it was a weekday. It wasn't Shabbos by Mincha anymore. It was a weekday by Shachris. And I was davening in a certain shul, and I was sitting in my regular spot, and in from the door walks Nathan of Gaza. And he pleads with me, and he begs me, Tzaddik, Rebbe, do me a favor, save my soul, do a mitzvah to save my soul, redeem me, I need tikkun, please, rectify me. And in my dream, I nodded to him, yes, Nathan, I'm going to rectify you. So what happened? It's the year 1911, Rosh Chodesh Teves. And I gathered 12 Bachrim, people who I knew are young men, not more than 18 years old, who have pure mouths, so that their Torah is Hevel Piv She'ein Boi Doifi. And the first thing I did is I convened the Beis Din. We had 9 men, and God was the 10th. And we removed all the charamim that the Gedolei Yisrael in the 1700s put on Nasan. We took it off him. Then we started to open up the Sefer Tehillim. And we read Sefer Aleph of Tehillim day 1. After that, we went around the Bima, and we said various tefillos. We said Yoshe B'Seisa Elyon, and we said Yan Hashem Yem Tzara, and we said Anenu, 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 and then we said a tefillah to be Masakein, the Naran, the Nefesh Ruach Neshama of Nasan HaAzazi. And we have over here the tefillah that they said to rectify his soul. They said, basically, God, you have mercy on everybody. Please, you have mercy on all the souls, whether they turn into rocks or plants or animals or a chai she'eino medar, a chai medaber. And even though this guy is good for, he was a good for nothing, but have rachmanas on him, do him a chesed chinam. And as only Rabbi Yehuda Fataya could do, he came up with a whole nusach. Please be merachem on Pliny ben Pliny, kel malei rachamim, and be misaki in his neshama, and all the neshamas that are floating around. And then what they did was, they said more tefillos, and of course they blew shofar. They had a few tkiyah shvam truas, and they made it look really good. And then they sat down, and they said the second Sefer of Tehillim, and they went through the whole process again, and they did it 7 times. And of course they ended off with what? Chananya ben Akasha Omer, and they said Kaddish with Al Yisrael. Fine. So did it work? Guess what happened? The second night of Shvat, I had another dream. And this time it wasn't Nathan of Gaza. It was a shliach of Nathan of Gaza. And he told me a pasuk. He said, Srufa ba'esh kesucha. So I was like thinking, what's he telling me? Oh, Baruch Hashem. Now, if Nathan of Gaza was a raven and he's floating around, so he's not in Gehenna. Where is he? He's in a place worse than Gehenna. He's in the Kafakela. He's in the slingshot place, right? Which is much worse than Gehenna. So what this guy was telling me is, Nathan is already burning in Gehenna because of your tefillos. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda Fatai was very matzliach. He got Nathan out of the Kafakela and he got him into the oven, which is far superior. It's much better to be in the oven than to be in the slingshot. And he was put into the oven so fast, he didn't have a chance to thank you. But I caught him on the way to Gehenna, and he told me, just if you happen to bump into Rabbi Yehuda Fatai, let him know that I really appreciate his efforts. And he gave me this look, like he wasn't happy with what I did. Like, what right do you have to take this rush out of the Kafakela and put him in Gehenna? He looked like he was very upset at me. And he even allowed me to see Nathan of Gaza heading into Gehenna. And Nathan of Gaza had this sinister look on his face, like he tricked the rabbi to get him out of the Kafakela. And he's back going into Gehenna with this smile on his face like he won the lottery. And as he's headed into Gehenna, 50 guys run out of Gehenna to try to stop him from coming into Gehenna. And he said, look, I'm a fully certified card-carrying member of Gehenna now. Yehuda Fataya got me in. And they're very angry. And says Rabbi Yehuda Fataya, he had this sinister look on his face, like he outsmarted the system. Well, you should know, says Rabbi Yehuda Fataya, that year that I got Nathan of Gaza out of the Kafakela into Gehenna was the worst year of my life. I had terrible Yisurim. But Baruch Hashem, Hashem didn't take my soul. God only punished me by taking my money and giving me Yisurim. Okay, the story's not over. The story's not over. Says Rabbi Yehuda Fataya, I can't believe a certain Rav by the name of Rabbi Menachem Minkin. Rabbi Menachem Minkin wrote a commentary on the Eitz Chaim, and in his commentary he said that Nathan of Gaza did not write the Chemdas Hayam. He says, what are you talking about? If anybody has any expertise in this book, it's clear that it was written by Nathan of Gaza. Why? First of all, in Hilchos Shabbos, he writes that I wrote these halachos when I was chased out of Eretz Yisrael. And everybody knows Nathan of Gaza was chased out of Eretz Yisrael when the Rabbanim put him into Cherem after he proclaimed Shabtai Tzvi as Mashiach. Second of all, if you look in his entries to Shabbos, he writes that his favorite Shabbos song was a certain song that was written by somebody by the name of Menachem Lunsano, and the author of Chemdas writes that I picked it for secret reasons. Well, says Rabbi Yehuda Fataya, I'll reveal to you what his secret reasons are. Because if you look at that piyut written by Rabbi Menachem Lunsano, the Rashi Teva spell out Menachem Lunsano until you get to the 12 last lines. And if you look at the 12 last lines of this piyut, and you add up the Rashi Tevos, the Rashi Tevos of the 12 last lines is 815, Shabtai Tzvi b'diyuk. And the Soifei Tevos add up to 379, which is Mashiach Eyeh. And even more than that, if you look at his last comment at the end of Hilchos Shabbos, he ends off as follows. He ends off, Ma'oirois Nosan Svivais Uzai. Nosan Aza. That means he's signing off his name, Nathan of Aza. And therefore, even though Nathan of Aza was a great Talmid Chacham, but you should know right now he's in the purgatory. But the conclusion of Rabbi Yehuda Fataya, who, by the way, saw from one end of the world to the next, he agreed with Rabbi Yaakov Eden that the source of many, many minhagim is the Sefer Chemdas Yamim. So I was a little bit surprised, because you have this beautiful haskama in the Sefer Chemdas Yamim from Rabbi Vad Yosef, and you have the endorsement of 90 of the all-time great Gedolei Yisrael. So, and Rabbi Vadia was a Talmud of Rabbi Yehuda Fataya. And Rabbi Yehuda Fataya said that he saw in his dream that Nathan of Gaza came to him and told him, this is my book, you should learn it and follow Shabtai Tzvi. So how do you argue with that? So there are many Svarim that they asked Rabbi Avadia this question. And Rabbi Avadia said the following: Dreams are nonsense. We ignore all dreams completely, and it doesn't matter who had them. Says Rabbi Avadia, it's a Sefer Kadosh. Somebody who learns it will be Nisayra and Yira Shamayim, and everything in the Sefer is Kadosh v'Tahar. What do we do with what Rabbi Yaakov Emden said? Rabbi Yaakov Emden, some Sefer says, was the greatest of all the Achronim. Gadol HaAchroin. And yet, we have 90 Gedolei Yisrael who vouch for the Sefer Chemdas Yamim. So Rabbi Isai, stay tuned for more. But in the meantime, your Tu B'Shvat practices are safe for now. Have a great evening. Shkaya.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.